Since I opened this context can of worms and found that expanding the context gave me a different perspective on the meaning of a particular passage, I'll expand the context again. Even before there were kings in Israel, God gave laws for the then future kings. When he sits on his royal throne, he must make a copy of this law on a scroll given to him by the Levitical priests. It must be with him constantly, and he must read it as long as he lives, so that he may learn to revere the Lord his God and observe all the words of this law and these statutes and carry them out. The passage titled Solomon's Wealth goes on and on about Solomon's gold. The law he was supposed to read every day said he must not accumulate much silver and gold. Solomon's wealth included a massive throne exalted 6 steps above everyone else in the room. The law Solomon was commanded to follow carefully said he should not exalt himself above his fellow citizens. Solomon's 12,000 Egyptian horses were also explicitly forbidden by the law intended to ensure that he and his descendants will enjoy many years ruling over his kingdom in Israel. Here is a contrast of the two passages. Solomon received 666 talents of gold per year, besides what he collected from the merchants, traders, Arabian kings, and governors of the land. King Solomon made 200 large shields of hammered gold. 600 measures of gold were used for each shield. He also made 300 small shields of hammered gold. 3 minas of gold were used for each of these shields. The king placed them in the palace of the Lebanon forest. All of King Solomon's cups were made of gold, and all the household items in the palace of the Lebanon forest were made of pure gold. There were no silver items, for silver was not considered very valuable in Solomon's time. Along with Hiram's fleet, the king had a fleet of large merchant ships that sailed the sea. Once every 3 years, the fleet came into port with cargoes of gold, silver, ivory, apes, and peacocks. King Solomon was wealthier and wiser than any of the kings of the earth. Everyone in the world wanted to visit Solomon to see him display his God-given wisdom. Year after year, visitors brought their gifts, which included items of silver, items of gold, clothes, perfume, spices, horses, and mules. He must not accumulate much silver and gold. The king made a large throne decorated with ivory and overlaid it with pure gold. There were 6 steps leading up to the throne, and the back of it was rounded on top. The throne had 2 armrests with a statue of a lion standing on each side. There were 12 statues of lions on the 6 steps, 1 lion at each end of each step. There was nothing like it in any other kingdom. When he sits on his royal throne, he must make a copy of this law on a scroll given to him by the Levitical priests. It must be with him constantly, and he must read it as long as he lives, so that he may learn to revere the Lord his God and observe all the words of this law and these statutes and carry them out. Then he will not exalt himself above his fellow citizens or turn from the commandments to the right or left. Solomon accumulated chariots and horses. He had 1,400 chariots and 12,000 horses. He kept them in assigned cities and in Jerusalem. The king made silver as plentiful in Jerusalem as stones. Cedar was as plentiful as sycamore fig trees are in the lowlands. Solomon acquired his horses from Egypt and from Kue. The king's traders purchased them from Kue. Moreover, he must not accumulate horses for himself or allow the people to return to Egypt to do so. For the Lord has said, you must never again return that way. If I ignore the topical headings and chapter markings in 1 Kings, both of which are later additions to the text, and simply continue reading after the section called Solomon's Wealth, I find that Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines. Solomon followed his wives in the worship of other gods. The law for the kings of Israel stated explicitly that the king should not take many wives, lest his affections turn aside. King Solomon fell in love with many foreign women, besides Pharaoh's daughter, including Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Sidonians, and Hittites. They came from nations about which the Lord had warned the Israelites, you must not establish friendly relations with them. If you do, they will surely shift your allegiance to their gods. But Solomon was irresistibly attracted to them. He had 700 royal wives and 300 concubines. His wives had a powerful influence over him. When Solomon became old, his wives shifted his allegiance to other gods. He was not wholeheartedly devoted to the Lord his God as his father David had been. Solomon worshipped the Sidonian goddess Astarte and the detestable Ammonite god Milcom. Furthermore, on the hill east of Jerusalem, Solomon built a high place for the detestable Moabite god Chemosh and for the detestable Ammonite god Milcom. He built high places for all his foreign wives so they could burn incense and make sacrifices to their gods. Furthermore, he must not marry many wives, lest his affections turn aside, for example, from the commandments to the right or left. There is a summation statement, Solomon did evil in the Lord's sight, with a topical heading, Solomon's wealth, and another topical heading, the Lord punishes Solomon for idolatry, and a chapter change from 10 to chapter 11. This summation appears only to apply to Solomon's many wives and idolatry. But if I consider that Solomon defied every law God gave the kings of Israel, because you insist on doing these things and have not kept the covenantal rules I gave you, I will surely tear the kingdom away from you and give it to your servant. I need to question the reliability of the topical headings and chapter break here. So, I have one passage in the Bible that seemed at first glance, with my view limited only to that particular passage, to be a laundry list of Solomon's wealth and power. When I expanded the context to include an incident from Solomon's life, the same passage became the fulfillment of God's promise to Solomon. When I expanded the context again to include God's law, an incident in the life of the nation of Israel, the same passage became an indictment of Solomon's reign as king. Now I'm ready to recant and say that Solomon's dream was just a dream, that it had nothing to do with how rich he was or wasn't.